I never thought my own parents would physically assault me in my childhood home over money I didn't even have. But when my grandfather's lawyer read that will, everything I thought I knew about my family shattered like glass. What happened next changed my life forever. And if you're dealing with toxic family members who see you as a piggy bank, you need to hear this.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 28 years, I believed I was living the life my parents had always envisioned for me. I worked as a veterinary technician at a small animal clinic in Portland, Oregon, making $42,000 a year. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved what I did. Every morning, I'd wake up in my modest one-bedroom apartment in the Hawthorne district, brew my coffee in the same chipped mug I'd had since college, and head to work, where I'd spend my days caring for animals who couldn't speak for themselves. My parents, Richard and Patricia Mitchell, lived in the sprawling 5-bedroom house in Lake Oswego, where I'd grown up. Dad had been a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company before he retired at 60, and Mom had never worked a day in her adult life. They'd always lived comfortably, but somewhere along the way, comfortable became expensive. The house had a pool they never used, a 3-car garage filled with Dad's vintage car collection, and a wine cellar Mom loved to show off to her book club friends. I saw them every Sunday for dinner. It was a tradition that started when I moved out at 22, and I'd never missed a single week. Mom would make pot roast, Dad would complain about politics, and I'd sit there, listening, nodding, playing the role of the dutiful daughter. They'd ask surface-level questions about my job, never really listening to my answers, and the conversation would inevitably drift back to them, their friends, their problems, their world. My younger brother, Jason, had escaped to Austin, Texas 3 years ago for a tech job. He rarely came home, maybe Christmas and Thanksgiving if we were lucky. I didn't blame him. He'd figured out something I hadn't quite grasped yet. Distance was a form of self-preservation. The only family member I felt truly close to was my grandfather, William Mitchell. Grandpa Will, as I called him, was 84 years old and lived in a retirement community in Beaverton. Unlike my parents, Grandpa Will had worked his entire life. He'd been a carpenter, building houses with his own hands, and had managed to save and invest wisely over the decades. He was sharp as a tack, with bright blue eyes that missed nothing, and a dry sense of humor that could catch you off guard. I visited him every Wednesday evening after work. We'd play chess, and he'd tell me stories about building the original Mitchell family home back in 1972, about my grandmother Eleanor, who'd passed when I was 12, about the Depression-era lessons his own father had taught him. "Money isn't about having it, Sarah," he'd tell me, moving his bishop across the board. "It's about what you do with it. Your character shows up in your choices." My parents visited Grandpa Will maybe once a month, always with an agenda. I'd noticed over the past year that these visits had become more frequent, and the tone had shifted. They'd started asking him about his plans, about his assets, dancing around the topic of inheritance with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. It made me uncomfortable, the way they'd suddenly become so attentive, so concerned about his well-being, while simultaneously fishing for information about his financial situation. Grandpa Will would just smile and change the subject, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. He'd built something from nothing, and his own son seemed more interested in what he'd leave behind than the man himself. My life had a rhythm to it, predictable and safe. I dated occasionally, nothing serious. I had friends from work, and we'd grab drinks on Friday nights at the pub down the street. I had student loans for my veterinary technician program, a car payment on my 10-year-old Honda Civic, and about $4,000 in savings that I was proud of, even though I knew it wasn't much. I told myself I was content. I had a job that mattered, an apartment that was mine, and independence. Sure, my parents could be difficult, and yes, Sunday dinners sometimes felt like obligations rather than enjoyable gatherings, but they were family. That meant something, didn't it? The cracks in this carefully constructed ordinary world started showing about 6 months before everything exploded.
Dad had started making comments about my career choices, wondering aloud why I'd settled for being a vet tech instead of going to actual veterinary school. You could have been making six figures by now, he'd say, cutting into a steak. But I guess some people are content with mediocrity. Mom would chime in with observations about my apartment, my clothes, my car. Sarah, darling, when are you going to start living like an adult? That neighborhood you're in, it's not exactly safe. And that car, honestly, it's embarrassing. What will people think? I'd brush it off, make excuses, change the subject. But their words had a way of burrowing under my skin, making me question choices I'd been perfectly happy with just days before. Was I settling? Should I want more? Why did their approval still matter to me so much? Jason called me one night in February, about 3 months before everything changed. You need to set boundaries with them, he said, his Texas drawl more pronounced after 3 years away. They're never going to respect you if you keep showing up every single Sunday, letting them criticize your entire existence over pot roast. They're our parents, I responded, folding laundry in my living room. You don't just cut off your parents. I'm not saying cut them off, Sarah. I'm saying protect yourself. There's a difference between being a good daughter and being a doormat. I got defensive, told him he didn't understand because he'd chosen to leave, and the conversation had ended awkwardly. But his words stuck with me, rattling around in my head during those Sunday dinners, during the moments when Dad would make another passive-aggressive comment about my life choices, when Mom would sigh dramatically about how she'd hoped at least one of her children would give her grandchildren before she was too old to enjoy them. The truth is, I'd built my entire identity around being the good daughter, the one who stayed, the one who showed up, the one who didn't cause problems or make waves. I'd watch Jason rebel and leave, and I'd unconsciously position myself as the opposite: reliable, present, compliant. But compliance has a cost, and I was about to learn just how high that cost could be. It was early May when Grandpa Will called me on a Tuesday night, which was unusual. Our routine was Wednesdays, and he was a man of routine. His voice sounded different, tired in a way I'd never heard before.
"Sarah, honey, I need to talk to you about something important," he said. "Can you come by tomorrow instead of Wednesday?" My stomach dropped. "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" I'm fine, he assured me, but I could hear something in his voice. "I just need to have a conversation with you, and it can't wait." I went to see him that Wednesday, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight the entire drive to Beaverton. When I arrived at his apartment in the retirement community, he had tea waiting and his chessboard was already set up, but we didn't play. Instead, he told me he'd been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 3 weeks ago. The doctors gave him maybe 6 months, possibly less. The world tilted. I couldn't breathe. Grandpa Will was the one constant, the one person in my family who saw me, really saw me, and now he was telling me he was dying. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Grandpa Will passed away on a Thursday morning in late June, just 6 weeks after his diagnosis. The cancer had moved faster than anyone expected. I'd spent every available moment with him during those final weeks, calling in sick to work, sleeping on the uncomfortable chair in his room at the hospice facility, holding his hand as his body slowly surrendered. My parents had visited twice during those 6 weeks. Twice. Both times they'd stayed less than an hour, uncomfortable with the reality of death, fidgeting in their chairs, checking their phones. Mom had wrinkled her nose at the antiseptic smell. Dad had made awkward small talk about the Portland Trailblazers. Jason flew in from Austin 3 days before Grandpa Will died. We sat together by his bedside, and for the first time in years, my brother and I felt like we were on the same team. Grandpa Will had been lucid that day, more alert than he'd been in a week. "You two take care of each other," he'd whispered, his voice barely audible. "Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up. Remember that." He'd looked at me then, really looked at me, and said something that wouldn't make sense until later. "Sarah, you're stronger than you think.
Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Not even the people who are supposed to love you most. The funeral was held on a Monday at Cedar Hill Cemetery. It was a beautiful July day, which felt wrong somehow. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and we were burying the best man I ever known. About 40 people came, mostly Grandpa Will's friends from the retirement community, some old colleagues from his carpentry days, neighbors who'd known him for decades. My parents had insisted on planning the service, and they'd turned it into something that felt more like a performance than a goodbye. Mom wore designer black from head to toe, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Dad gave a eulogy that was so generic it could have been about anyone, full of platitudes about a life well lived and a man who valued family above all else. I wanted to stand up and scream. Grandpa Will had valued integrity above all else, honesty, hard work. Family was important to him, but only when that family deserved the title. But I sat there silently, the good daughter, swallowing my anger. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following Friday at the offices of Brennan and Associates, the law firm that had handled Grandpa Will's affairs for 30 years. My parents had been anxious all week, pretending they weren't, but I could see it in the way Mom kept checking her reflection in every mirror, the way Dad had suddenly started being nice to me, asking about my job, my apartment, whether I needed anything. We should all go to lunch after, Mom had suggested on Thursday night when she called, as a family to celebrate William's life and discuss next steps. Next steps. Like Grandpa Will's death was just an item on a to-do list. Jason had decided to stay in Portland for another week, crashing on my couch. He said, "I want to be there for the will reading. Something about this whole thing feels off." We arrived at the law offices at 2 o'clock on Friday. The building was downtown, one of those older structures with actual character, wood paneling and brass fixtures. A receptionist led us to a conference room where a man in his 60s was waiting, silver-haired and sharp-eyed behind wire-rimmed glasses. He said, "I'm Robert Brennan. I've been William's attorney for 28 years. Please have a seat." My parents sat on one side of the long mahogany table, Jason and I on the other. Mr. Brennan sat at the head, a manila folder in front of him that seemed to hold the weight of the world. He said, "Before we begin," he looked at my father, "I want to make something clear. William revised his will 3 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis. What I'm about to read reflects his final wishes, made with complete mental clarity and sound judgment. I have medical documentation confirming his competency at the time as he anticipated there might be questions." My mother's smile faltered. Dad's jaw tightened. Mr. Brennan opened the folder and began to read. The legal language was dense, but the message was crystal clear. Grandpa Will had divided his estate into specific portions. The house he built in 1972, which he had kept as a rental property for years, and was now worth approximately $800,000, went to Jason. His investment portfolio, valued at around $600,000, went to me. Various personal items and a small trust fund of $50,000 was set up for any future great-grandchildren. And to his son, Richard Mitchell, he left exactly $1 and a letter. The silence in that room was deafening. I couldn't process what I'd just heard. $600,000? That was more money than I'd ever imagined having in my entire lifetime. Jason looked equally stunned. But my parents looked like they'd been slapped. "This is insane," Dad said, his voice low and dangerous. "Our father left us nothing. Nothing except $1 and some insulting letter." "There must be a mistake," Mom added, her voice shrill. "Richard was his only son, his only son. How could he—" "There's no mistake," Mr. Brennan interrupted, his tone firm. "William was very explicit about his reasoning. Would you like me to read the letter he left for you?" Dad stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're damn right I want to hear it." Mr. Brennan pulled out a sealed envelope, opened it, and read, "Richard,
I'm leaving you $1 so you can't claim I forgot you. The truth is, I've watched you for 62 years and I've seen who you really are. You never wanted a father, you wanted a bank account. You've spent your entire life chasing money and status, and you've raised your children in a home where love came with conditions and criticism. You retired early and lived beyond your means, expecting me to bail you out eventually. I won't. I've given Sarah and Jason what I've earned because they've shown me character, kindness, and genuine love. They visited me because they wanted to, not because they wanted something. That's the difference. I hope you learn it before it's too late, but I'm not holding my breath. William Mitchell. The air went out of the room. Mom was crying now, real tears this time, but they were tears of rage, not grief. Dad's face had turned a deep red, the vein in his forehead pulsing. "Those little vultures," Mom hissed, looking at Jason and me like we were strangers. "You poisoned him against us. You manipulated a dying old man." "Mrs. Mitchell, that's absolutely not," Mr. Brennan started, but Dad cut him off. "How much is the total? How much did they get?" "Approximately $1.4 million plus personal effects and the trust," Mr. Brennan said calmly. Dad turned to me, his eyes cold. "You're going to share that money with us, 50-50. We're your parents. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. You owe us." I found my voice, finally. "Dad, I didn't know about any of this. I never asked Grandpa for—" "Don't give me that innocent act, Sarah," he snarled. "You were there every week, whispering in his ear, playing the devoted granddaughter. You knew exactly what you were doing." Jason stood up. "That's enough. Sarah loved Grandpa. We both did. Maybe if you'd spent less time asking him about his assets and more time actually caring about him as a person, this conversation would be different." "You stay out of this," Mom snapped at Jason. "You abandoned this family years ago. You have no right to—" "This meeting is over," Mr. Brennan said, standing. "The will is legally binding. If you wish to contest it, that's your right, but I assure you it won't succeed. William was thorough. Now, I need to ask you both to leave. I have additional documents to review with Sarah and Jason privately." My parents didn't move. They sat there, staring at us with such hatred that I felt physically ill. These were the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And in this moment, I was looking at two strangers who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between them and money. "Get out," Dad said quietly. "Both of you, get out of this office right now." "Richard, we're not leaving," Mr. Brennan said firmly. "You are. Security will escort you if necessary." Finally, they left, but not before Mom leaned in close to me and whispered, "This isn't over, not by a long shot. You're going to pay for this, Sarah. One way or another, you're going to pay." The door slammed behind them, and I realized I was shaking. Jason put his arm around me, and Mr. Brennan poured us both water from a pitcher on the credenza. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," he said gently. "Your grandfather warned me this might happen. That's why he left specific instructions for what comes next." What came next would be worse than anything I could have imagined. The phone calls started that same night. My cell phone rang 17 times between 8 p.m. and midnight. I didn't answer. Each voicemail was progressively angrier, my mother's voice rising from wounded disbelief to pure venom. "How could you do this to us? We gave you everything. You're going to make this right, Sarah, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Jason stayed at my apartment, sleeping on the couch, both of us too rattled to be alone. Around 1 in the morning, someone started pounding on my apartment door. We both froze. "Sarah, open this door right now." It was my father's voice, slurred and furious. "We need to talk about this like adults." "He's drunk," Jason whispered. "Don't open it." The pounding continued for another 10 minutes. My neighbor across the hall, Mr. Chen, an elderly man who taught piano lessons, cracked his door open. "Should I call the police?" he mouthed. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. This was my father. The man who taught me to ride a bike,
who'd sat through my high school orchestra concerts, even though I was terrible at the clarinet. And now he was drunk, outside my apartment, demanding money from his dead father's estate. The police arrived within 15 minutes. I heard muffled conversation in the hallway, my father's voice rising in protest, then finally silence. An officer knocked gently on my door. "He's gone, ma'am," the young officer said when I opened up. "We strongly suggested he go home and sleep it off. Is there a history of domestic violence we should know about?" "No," I said, though I wasn't even sure what qualified as violence. "Nothing physical." "Keep your doors locked. If he comes back, call us immediately. We've documented this incident." Sleep didn't come that night. Jason and I sat in my tiny living room, drinking tea, trying to process what our family had become in the span of a few hours. "I should give them something," I said finally, around 3 a.m, "from my share. It's not right that they got nothing." Jason looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Sarah, did you hear that letter? Did you see how they treated you tonight? They don't deserve a penny." "But they're our parents. Maybe if we just give them enough to feel secure, this all blows over and we can..." "Can what? Go back to Sunday dinners where they treat you like garbage? Wake up, Sarah. This isn't about the money. It's about control. It's about how they've always seen you as an extension of themselves, something they own." Grandpa Will knew exactly what he was doing. I wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. We both finally crashed around 4 a.m. Saturday brought a new strategy from my parents, the guilt campaign. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother at 9 a.m. "Your father is having chest pains. The stress you've caused might actually kill him. Is that what you want? To have your father's death on your conscience?" I called immediately, panicked. Mom answered on the first ring, her voice perfectly calm. "Oh, he's fine now," she said breezily. "The pain stopped. But Sarah, we really need to discuss this situation. Come to the house tomorrow. Sunday dinner just like always. We can talk this through as a family." "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't be dramatic. We're your parents. You owe us at least a conversation. 1 o'clock, I'm making pot roast." She hung up before I could respond. The rest of the weekend was a blur of anxiety. I called in sick to work for Monday, something I never did. My boss, Dr. Patricia Reeves, was understanding. "Take the time you need, Sarah. Grief is complicated." But this wasn't grief. It was something darker, more suffocating. I kept replaying Grandpa Will's words in my head. "You're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Was I strong? I'd spent 28 years being compliant, agreeable, desperate for approval. The thought of standing up to my parents made me physically ill, but the thought of walking into that house tomorrow terrified me even more. Sunday morning, Jason made the decision for me. "You're not going," he said firmly. "I'll go. I'll talk to them." "They'll tear you apart." "Let them try. I got out once. I know how they operate." He drove to Lake Oswego at 12:30. I paced my apartment, my phone clutched in my hand. He called me at 2:15 p.m. "You need to hear this," he said, and I could tell he was recording. "I'm putting you on speaker. Say what you just said to me again, Dad." My father's voice came through, cold and calculated. "Fine. We've consulted with our attorney. We're prepared to contest the will, drag this through probate court for years. It'll cost you both a fortune in legal fees. Or you can do the right thing and give us what we're entitled to, $250,000 each, $500,000 total. That's more than fair, considering we raised you, paid for your education, gave you every advantage." "We paid for our own education," Jason said. "Student loans, remember?" "Semantics," Mom chimed in. "The point is, you owe us. And if you don't pay, we'll make your lives a living hell. We'll tell everyone who'll listen how you manipulated a senile old man. We'll destroy your reputations. You'll what?" Jason interrupted. You'll prove Grandpa Will right about everything he wrote in that letter? That letter was the confused ramblings of a dying man, Dad spat. Probably written under duress. Our lawyer thinks we have a strong case for undue influence. I listened, my heart sinking. This wasn't grief talking. This was premeditation. They'd already hired an attorney. They'd already calculated exactly how much they wanted. They'd planned this. Think about it, Mom said, her voice softening into the sweet tone she used to use when I was a child. Just think about it, sweetheart. Family is everything. Don't let money tear us apart. Jason ended the call. When he got back to my apartment an hour later, he looked exhausted. They're serious, he said. They showed me the lawyer's card. Some guy named Mitchell Harrington from a firm in Beaverton. They've already paid him a $5,000 retainer. I felt sick. Maybe we should just give them something. Not $500,000, but something. Make this go away. Sarah, listen to me. If you give them money now, you're teaching them that threats work. They'll come back for more, again and again. This is who they are. This is who they've always been. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy trying to be the perfect daughter. He was right. Deep down, I knew he was right. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two different things. That night, I got an email from my mother. The subject line read, "Final offer." Inside was a detailed breakdown. They wanted $250,000 for my inheritance. They'd written out exactly how I should structure the payment, a lump sum within 30 days transferred directly to their account. In exchange, they'd sign a document agreeing not to contest the will. This is your chance to do the right thing, to prove you're the daughter we raised you to be. We expect your answer by Wednesday. After that, we proceed with legal action, and things will get very ugly. We're giving you a gift by even offering this option. Don't be foolish enough to throw it away. Love, Mom and Dad. Love, Mom and Dad. I read those words over and over until they stopped making sense. What kind of love came with ultimatums? What kind of parents threatened their own children? I had 3 days to decide whether to hand over $250,000 to people who'd just proven they valued money more than they valued me. 3 days to choose between financial security and family peace. 3 days to figure out if I was strong enough to say no. The doubt was eating me alive. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe they deserved something. Maybe I was the terrible daughter they were painting me to be. Wednesday was approaching fast, and I had no idea what I was going to do.
The next 2 weeks became a descent into hell I never saw coming. My parents didn't just hire one attorney, they hired 3. Mitchell Harrington was apparently just the beginning. They brought in a probate specialist named Victoria Chen and some high-powered litigator from Seattle named David Kornfeld who'd made his name tearing apart estate cases. The first lawsuit arrived via certified mail on a Tuesday. Petition to contest will based on undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. The legal document was 47 pages long, filled with accusations that made my stomach turn. According to their filing, I had systematically isolated William Mitchell from his family, exploited his deteriorating mental condition, and manipulated a vulnerable elderly man for financial gain. None of it was true, but it was there, in black and white, filed with the county courthouse, a matter of public record. Jason's lawsuit came the same day. His accused him of colluding with me and forging documents. There was no evidence, because there was no truth to any of it, but that didn't seem to matter. This is their strategy, Mr. Brennan explained when we met at his office. They're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. The good news is none of these claims have merit. The bad news is defending against them will be expensive and time-consuming. We're looking at 12 to 18 months of litigation, possibly longer if they appeal. How much will it cost? I asked, my voice hollow. With 3 attorneys working against us, conservatively, you're each looking at $75,000 to $100,000 in legal fees, maybe more. The inheritance suddenly felt less like a gift and more like a curse. I'd have to spend a significant portion of what Grandpa Will left me just to keep what was rightfully mine. But the lawsuits were only the beginning. My parents launched a social media campaign that was as calculated as it was cruel. My mother posted a long, tearful video on Facebook describing how her ungrateful children had stolen their dying grandfather's fortune. She didn't mention the letter Grandpa Will had written. She didn't mention the years of neglect. She painted a picture of two greedy kids who'd manipulated a confused old man. The post went viral in our community. Within days, I had hundreds of comments from people I'd never met, calling me every name imaginable. Former neighbors from Lake Oswego who'd known me as a child were sending messages about how disappointed they were. My mother's book club friends were sharing the post with sad face emojis and comments like, "I always knew those kids were trouble." Someone found my workplace. The veterinary clinic's Yelp page was suddenly flooded with one-star reviews. "Sarah Mitchell works here and she's a con artist who steals from elderly people. Don't trust anyone at this clinic, especially the vet tech who manipulated her own grandfather." Dr. Reeves called me into her office on Thursday. She looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, I know what's happening with your family, and I believe you. I know you'd never do what they're accusing you of. But these reviews are hurting the practice. We've had 3 clients call to switch to other clinics. I'm not asking you to quit, but I need you to understand the position this puts me in." I understood perfectly. I was toxic now. My presence was damaging her business. I can take a leave of absence," I offered, fighting back tears, "until this blows over." "That might be best," she said, relief washing over her face. "Paid leave, of course, just until things settle down." I left work that day not knowing if I'd ever come back. The isolation was suffocating. Friends I'd had for years stopped returning my calls. People I'd considered close were suddenly too busy to meet for coffee. No one wanted to get involved in family drama, especially when that drama was playing out so publicly. My apartment, my sanctuary, stopped feeling safe. I'd come home to find letters shoved under my door. Some were from my parents, alternating between threats and guilt trips. Others were from strangers who'd somehow found my address, telling me I was going to hell, that karma would catch up to me, that I deserved whatever was coming. Jason was dealing with his own nightmare in Austin. His employer had received an anonymous tip that he was under investigation for fraud. It wasn't true, but HR still had to look into it. His girlfriend of 2 years, Emily, had broken up with him after my mother called her personally to warn her about Jason's character issues. "They're trying to destroy us," Jason said during one of our nightly phone calls. "They're literally trying to burn our lives to the ground because we wouldn't give them money."
The worst part was the doubt that crept in during the quiet moments. At 3 a.m, when I couldn't sleep, I'd find myself wondering if I was the problem. Had I spent too much time with Grandpa Will? Had I somehow, subconsciously, influenced his decisions? Was I really the selfish person my parents were painting me as? I'd pull out the recordings Jason had made, replay them, remind myself of the cold calculation in my parents' voices. But even then, a small voice would whisper, "But they raised you. They're your parents. Maybe you do owe them something." The anxiety attacks started in week 3. I'd be grocery shopping, and suddenly I couldn't breathe, my vision tunneling, my heart racing like it was trying to escape my chest. I'd have to abandon my cart and flee to my car, gasping for air. I stopped eating properly. Sleep became impossible without medication. I lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the hollow-eyed woman staring back at me. My parents escalated further. They filed a restraining order against me, claiming I'd threatened them. It was dismissed immediately because I'd never been anywhere near them. But the process was humiliating. I had to appear in court, had to sit across from them while their attorney painted me as unstable and dangerous. The judge wasn't buying it. "This is clearly a harassment tactic," she said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Request denied. In counsel, I strongly suggest you advise your clients about the consequences of filing frivolous motions." But the damage was done. There was now a court record with my name attached to accusations of threats and instability. Then came the breaking point. I arrived home one evening to find my apartment had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but everything was wrong. Drawers were pulled open, paper scattered, my laptop left open on my bed. Someone had been through every inch of my personal space. The police came, but there was no sign of forced entry. "Do you have enemies?" the officer asked, and I almost laughed. Where would I even start? I called Jason, sobbing. "I can't do this anymore. I can't. Maybe we should just give them the money. Maybe it's not worth it." "Sarah, no, listen to me. They've taken my job, my friends, my peace of mind. They've violated my home. What's next? How far are they going to go? At what point do we just cut our losses and give them what they want?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Is that really what you want to do?" Jason asked quietly. "Give them $250,000 because they've successfully terrorized you into submission? Let them win?" "I don't care about winning," I said, my voice breaking. "I just want my life back." "If you give them this money, you won't get your life back. You'll just teach them that abuse works. And they'll do it again and again until there's nothing left of you." I hung up, curled into a ball on my violated bed, and cried until I had nothing left. This was the valley, the absolute lowest point. The place we're giving up seemed like the only rational option, where the pain of fighting felt worse than the pain of surrendering. I had a choice to make, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't see a clear path forward. All I knew was that something had to change. I couldn't live like this anymore. The question was whether I'd find the strength to keep fighting or whether I'd finally break and give my parents exactly what they wanted.
I was sitting in my car outside my apartment at 2 in the morning, too afraid to go inside, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Sarah Mitchell?" A woman's voice, older, unfamiliar. "Yes?" "My name is Dorothy Brennan. I'm Robert Brennan's wife. I hope you don't mind, but my husband told me what you've been going through, and I had to call. Do you have a few minutes?" I have nothing but minutes. Endless, terrifying minutes I was spending hiding in my car. "Your grandfather built our house," she said, "back in 1978. Beautiful craftsman on the east side. We loved that house so much that when we needed some repairs done 15 years later, we tracked William down and asked him to do the work himself. He and my husband became close friends after that." I'd never known this. Grandpa Will had never mentioned it. "William talked about you all the time," Dorothy continued. "He was so proud of you, not because of what you achieved, but because of who you were. Kind, he'd say, genuine, someone who showed up for people without expecting anything in return." Tears were streaming down my face. "He also talked about your parents. This isn't new, Sarah. The way they're treating you now, it's who they've always been. William saw it clearly. He watched them try to control you your entire life, watched them criticize and diminish you, and it broke his heart. That's why he left you that inheritance, not as a burden, but as a tool, as freedom." "It doesn't feel like freedom," I whispered. "It feels like I'm drowning." "I know, honey, but here's what I want you to understand. I worked as a therapist for 40 years before I retired. I specialized in family trauma and narcissistic abuse. And everything you've described, the smear campaign, the lawsuits, the isolation tactics, the guilt trips, it's textbook. Your parents are following a playbook that abusive people have been using forever." Something shifted in my chest. A playbook? This wasn't personal. This wasn't about me being a bad daughter. This was a pattern. The goal isn't actually the money. The money is just the excuse. The real goal is control. They're trying to prove that you still belong to them, that they can still manipulate your choices. If you give them what they want, you're confirming that their tactics work, and they'll use those tactics on you for the rest of your life. But what if I can't survive this? What if they destroy everything? Sarah, listen to me very carefully. You're already surviving this. You're in the middle of the fire right now, and you're still standing. Do you know how strong that makes you? I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. I want you to try something. Tomorrow, I want you to write down every single thing they've accused you of, every lie, every manipulation. Then, I want you to write the truth next to each one. Look at it objectively. Would you say these things to someone you actually loved? Would you treat someone this way if you genuinely cared about them? We talked for another hour. She told me about other clients she'd worked with who'd been through similar situations. She explained the psychology behind what my parents were doing. She helped me see that my guilt wasn't evidence of wrongdoing. It was evidence of a conscience, something my parents clearly lacked. When I finally hung up, something had changed. The fog of doubt had lifted just enough for me to see clearly. I went inside my apartment, no longer afraid. I pulled out my laptop and started writing. Every accusation, every lie, every manipulation, and next to each one, the truth. They said I'd isolated Grandpa Will from the family. The truth, I visited Grandpa Will weekly for years. They visited monthly and only to ask about money. They said I'd manipulated a senile old man. The truth, Grandpa Will was sharp until his final days. Mr. Brennan had medical documentation proving his competency. They said I was greedy and selfish. The truth, I'd never asked Grandpa Will for anything. I'd loved him for who he was, not what he had. By the time the sun came up, I'd filled 12 pages. And for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I called Mr. Brennan's office at 9 a.m. sharp. I need you to do something. I need you to file a countersuit. Harassment, defamation, abuse of process, everything they've done. I want it documented. I want it on record. Are you sure? This will escalate things significantly. I'm sure. They've been escalating for weeks while I've been trying to be reasonable. I'm done being reasonable with people who see kindness as weakness. I'll draft the documents today, and I could hear the approval in his voice. Next, I called a private investigator that Mr. Brennan recommended. Her name was Angela Torres, and she specialized in documenting harassment cases. I need proof of everything they're doing, the fake reviews, the social media posts, the anonymous letters. I need it all documented and traced back to them. Consider it done, Angela said. People like this always leave a trail. They think they're being clever, but they're usually sloppy.
Then I did something that felt revolutionary. I called Dr. Reeves. I want to come back to work, I said. Not next month, next week. And I want your permission to address the fake reviews publicly. There was a pause. Sarah, are you sure you're ready? I'm ready to stop hiding. These reviews are defamatory lies, and I have proof. I'm going to respond to every single one with the truth and the legal documentation backing it up. If clients choose to leave after seeing the facts, that's their choice. But I'm not going to let lies define me anymore. Okay, Dr. Reeves said slowly. Okay, come in Monday. We'll figure this out together. The next call was the hardest. I dialed my parents' number for the first time in weeks. My mother answered on the second ring. Sarah, finally, you've come to your senses. Did you get our latest proposal? We're willing to settle for... I'm not calling about money, I interrupted. I'm calling to tell you that I've filed a countersuit against you. You're being sued for harassment, defamation, and abuse of process. You'll be served within 48 hours. Silence. I'm also putting you on notice that every communication from this point forward will be documented and potentially used as evidence. If you contact me directly, my workplace, my friends, or anyone in my life again, I'll pursue a restraining order. All future communication goes through attorneys. You ungrateful little... I hung up.
My hands were shaking, but it was a different kind of shaking. Not fear. Adrenaline. I called Jason next. I'm fighting back. Really fighting back. Are you with me? I've been waiting for you to say that for 3 weeks. What do you need? Everything you've got. Every recording, every text, every email. We're building a case, and we're going to show exactly who they are. Over the next few days, something miraculous happened. As I stopped defending myself and started documenting, the truth became undeniable. Angela traced the fake Yelp reviews back to IP addresses at my parents' house and my mother's phone. She found deleted Facebook posts where Mom had bragged to friends about teaching Sarah a lesson. She discovered emails between my parents and their attorneys discussing pressure tactics and breaking her will. Mr. Brennan compiled everything into a devastating counterfiling. The evidence was overwhelming. But the real breakthrough came on Friday afternoon. I was at Grandpa Will's old apartment, going through some of his remaining personal effects that Mr. Brennan had been storing, when I found a box labeled, "For Sarah, open when you need strength." Inside were letters, dozens of them. Letters Grandpa Will had written to me over the years but never sent. Letters documenting things he'd witnessed, conversations he'd overheard, moments when my parents had revealed their true nature. One letter, dated 3 years ago, made me sob. "Sarah, my dear girl, I saw you at dinner tonight with your parents. I saw how your mother criticized everything about you, your clothes, your job, your apartment, and I saw how you shrunk into yourself, trying to be smaller, trying to be acceptable. It reminded me of a bird trying to fit into a cage too small for its wings. You are not meant for cages, Sarah. You are meant to fly. One day, you'll understand that the people who truly love you don't spend their energy trying to make you smaller. They celebrate your wingspan. I love you exactly as you are. Never forget that. Grandpa Will." I sat on the floor of that empty apartment and cried. But these weren't tears of despair, they were tears of recognition. Grandpa Will had seen me, really seen me, and he'd left me more than money. He'd left me validation. He'd left me proof that I wasn't crazy, that my parents' treatment of me was real and wrong and documented. I drove home with that box of letters on my passenger seat, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. The fire hadn't destroyed me. It was forging me into someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who wouldn't accept crumbs of affection from people who should have offered unconditional love. I was done being the good daughter who sacrificed herself for approval that would never come. It was time to be the strong woman Grandpa Will had always known I could be.
The countersuit hit my parents like a freight train they never saw coming. Within 72 hours of being served, their attorney Mitchell Harrington withdrew from the case. Apparently, when confronted with Angela's evidence, the traced IP addresses, the documented harassment campaign, the emails discussing pressure tactics, he realized he'd been fed a completely fabricated story. No lawyer wants their name attached to a case built on lies and potential criminal behavior. Victoria Chen, the probate specialist, followed suit 2 days later. Only David Cornfield, the Seattle litigator, remained, and even he started making noises about settlement. The first domino fell in court 3 weeks after I'd filed my countersuit. My parents' petition to contest the will was scheduled for a preliminary hearing. Mr. Brennan had prepared meticulously, and he came armed with everything. Grandpa Will's medical records proving mental competency, testimony from his doctors, the letters Grandpa Will had written documenting years of my parents' behavior, and Angela's investigation showing the coordinated harassment campaign. The judge, Honorable Margaret Freeman, was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen every trick in the book. She listened to David Cornfeld's arguments for about 15 minutes before holding up her hand. "Counselor, I've reviewed the evidence submitted by the defense. I've read William Mitchell's letter to his son. I've seen the medical documentation. And frankly, I've reviewed the counterclaims regarding your client's behavior following the reading of this will. This petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning your clients for filing a frivolous lawsuit, and I'm ordering them to pay the defendant's legal fees to date. My mother gasped audibly from across the courtroom. My father's face turned purple. Your Honor, we'd like to request, Kornfeld started. There's nothing to request, Judge Freeman interrupted. This will is airtight. William Mitchell knew exactly what he was doing and why he was doing it. Case dismissed. And I strongly suggest your clients consider the consequences before filing any further actions. This court does not appreciate being used as a weapon in family disputes. I walked out of that courtroom feeling 10 pounds lighter. The first major battle was won. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Angela's investigation had uncovered something beautiful, a digital trail of destruction that my parents had been arrogant enough to leave behind. She'd traced the fake Yelp reviews not just to their devices, but had recovered deleted drafts where my mother had workshopped different versions, trying to make them sound like they came from different people. She'd found the Facebook group where Mom had coordinated her prayer chain friends to share her viral post. She'd even discovered emails where Dad had discussed hiring someone to dig up dirt on Jason and me. Mr. Brennan took all of this evidence and filed an amended complaint that included specific damages, loss of income from my forced leave, therapy costs for the trauma they'd inflicted, and punitive damages for the malicious nature of their campaign. They're going to settle, he told me during a meeting in early September. Kornfeld called this morning. They want to negotiate. What are they offering? Jason asked. He'd flown in from Austin for the hearing and decided to stay through the settlement discussions. They'll drop all their claims and agree to a no-contact order in exchange for you both dropping the countersuit. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No. Mr. Brennan raised his eyebrows. No? They need to pay for what they've done, not just to us, but to Grandpa Will's memory. I want financial consequences. I want it on public record that they lied, harassed, and defamed their own children over money they were never entitled to. I want every person who shared my mother's sob story to know the truth. Jason was grinning. I'm with Sarah. Then we go to trial, Mr. Brennan said, and he looked pleased. We never made it to trial. 2 weeks later, faced with the mountain of evidence and the possibility of criminal charges for some of their harassment tactics, my parents settled. They agreed to pay $150,000 in damages, split between Jason and me, issue a public apology and retraction on social media, sign a permanent no-contact agreement, and cover all legal fees for both sides. The money wasn't the victory. The public apology was. My mother's Facebook post, the one that had gone viral and destroyed my reputation, was deleted and replaced with a statement drafted by their attorney. I posted false and defamatory statements about my daughter Sarah Mitchell and Jason Mitchell regarding their relationship with their grandfather, William Mitchell. These statements were untrue. Sarah and Jason did not manipulate or coerce their grandfather in any way. His will reflected his true wishes, made with full mental capacity. I deeply regret the harm my false accusations caused to their reputations and livelihoods. I retract all previous statements and apologize unreservedly. It stayed pinned to the top of her profile for 6 months, per the settlement agreement. Every single person who shared her original post got to see the truth. The fake Yelp reviews were removed and replaced with a statement from the platform noting they'd been posted fraudulently. Dr. Reeves welcomed me back to work with open arms, and our actual clients, the ones who knew me, rallied around the clinic. We got 15 new 5-star reviews in a single week from people who wanted to support us. But the external victories, as sweet as they were, weren't what transformed me. The real change happened internally.
I started therapy with a trauma specialist recommended by Dorothy Brennan. Her name was Dr. Lisa Chen, and she helped me understand something crucial. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn love from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. Not because I was unworthy, but because they were emotionally bankrupt. You can't get water from an empty well, Dr. Chen told me during one session. You kept going back to that well with your bucket, hoping that maybe this time, if you just tried hard enough, there'd be something there. But the well was always empty, Sarah. It had nothing to do with your bucket. I grieved. Not for my parents as they were, but for the parents I'd wished they could be. I mourned the relationship I'd wanted but never had. And then, slowly, I let it go. I started building a life based on what I wanted, not what I thought would finally make me acceptable to people who would never accept me. I enrolled in online courses to become a certified veterinary technician specialist. I moved to a better apartment with actual sunlight and a small balcony where I could grow herbs. I adopted a 3-legged rescue cat named Cooper, who'd been at the shelter for 8 months because everyone wanted the perfect pets. Jason and I grew closer than we'd ever been. He'd used part of his inheritance to start his own tech consulting company, and we'd video chat weekly, not out of obligation, but because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We'd both escaped the cage, and we were learning how to fly. I went on my first real date in over a year with a guy named Marcus, who worked as a physical therapist. He was kind and funny and had no idea who my family was or what I'd been through. When I eventually told him, months later, he just held my hand and said, "That must have been incredibly painful. I'm glad you're here now." The inheritance that had seemed like such a curse became the foundation for a new life. I didn't buy anything extravagant. Instead, I invested most of it, kept a healthy emergency fund, and used a small portion to do something Grandpa Will would have loved. I started a scholarship fund for veterinary technician students from low-income backgrounds. The first recipient was a single mother of 2 who reminded me of the younger version of myself, full of potential, just needing someone to believe in her. A year after Grandpa Will's death, I visited his grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought fresh flowers and sat on the grass next to his headstone. "You were right," I said aloud, not caring if anyone heard me. "I am stronger than I thought I was. And the inheritance wasn't really about the money, was it? It was about giving me the resources to finally break free. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for loving me enough to set me free." The wind rustled through the trees, and I swear I could feel him smiling. I learned that family isn't determined by blood. It's determined by behavior, by respect, by genuine love. I built a new family from friends who showed up, from colleagues who supported me, from people like Dorothy and Mr. Brennan who extended kindness when they didn't have to. My parents tried to reach out once, about 18 months after the settlement. A letter arrived, not at my apartment, they didn't have that address anymore, but forwarded through Mr. Brennan's office. It was short. "We'd like to reconcile. Can we talk?" I thought about it carefully. I consulted with Dr. Chen, and then I wrote back, one final time. "Reconciliation requires accountability, changed behavior, and genuine remorse. Your letter offers none of these. You want absolution without transformation. That's not how healing works. I wish you well, but I will not be part of your lives going forward. Please respect the no-contact agreement." I never heard from them again. Today, I'm 30 years old. I'm a certified veterinary technician specialist earning $65,000 a year at a job I love. I have a circle of friends who actually know me and value me. I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who thinks my independence is attractive, not threatening. I sleep peacefully at night in an apartment that's truly mine. The little girl who used to shrink herself into a cage that was never meant for her has learned to spread her wings. And Grandpa Will was right about one more thing. Character really does show up in your choices. Every day, I choose kindness over cruelty, honesty over manipulation, boundaries over guilt. I choose to be nothing like the people who raised me. That's the greatest inheritance of all. Not the money, but the freedom to become who I was always meant to be. If you're dealing with family members who see you as a piggy bank, who weaponize guilt, who can't celebrate your success without tearing you down, hear me. You don't owe them your peace. You don't owe them your mental health. You don't owe them access to your life just because you share DNA. The hardest thing I ever did was walk away from my parents. But it was also the most necessary thing. It saved my life. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is close the door on people who refuse to treat you with respect. And sometimes the people who truly love you are the ones who give you permission to fly, even when it means flying away from them. Grandpa Will gave me that permission, and now I'm giving it to you.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.